Welcome to the RenderNow tutorial. Today we're going to go over these topics, and we're going to start with an overview of what RenderNow is. You can at any point skip between different topics at any point in time. So what is RenderNow? RenderNow helps you save time and money by allowing you to create fast and simple designs within a cloud-based software application. Next, we'll go over support. So if at any point you want to get in contact with us or have any questions or you get stuck, the first option would be to use the chat box down here at the bottom right corner of the website. This could be on our website or the RenderNow.co website. And you're just going to click on this and type in anything, and we're available from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Mountain Time. If we're not available, outside of those hours, you can just leave a message and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. You can also go down to the support page right here, and this will give you a couple different steps, and you can also send a feedback form or any information here to get in contact with us as well. Next, we'll cover logging in. So when you navigate to either rendernow.co, you can go to the dashboard and then the RenderNow tab. Once you go to the RenderNow tab, you'll select either USA, or if you're in a different country, you'll select other countries. Once this initializes, you'll just hit play, and this will take anywhere from 15 seconds to 30 seconds to load if you're in the USA. Other countries tend to take a little bit longer to load. If you experience any issues while loading, just go ahead and refresh the page and start again. Once you get to the login page here, you won't have any credentials in here, so you'll have to either enter your email and password if you already have an account. If you don't have an account, just go ahead to create new account, type in your email, hit create new account, and your email will be sent a password reset email, and then you can go ahead and reset your password. The email will actually come from a name called PlayFab, but it will say event render or render now on the email, and then you can reset your password, come back here and log in with your new password. Next, we'll cover loading and saving. When you start up your application or the application and log into your account, you'll have the option to start with a starter project here. And so the best option is to select the starter project and hit load selected. You can always get back to the saving and loading with that button that says save on here. And you can also save your project anytime you want by hitting Control and S at the same time, or Alt and S at the same time, which will save your project. There's also an autosave feature which saves your project every 4 minutes. Next, we'll go over editing controls and other settings. So if you've never used the program, you can start by using this built-in tutorial here. This will show up every time you log in. You can either hit skip tutorial or just go ahead and start doing the tutorial and moving through it, which will help with a number of controls. One thing that might help is going in full screen, so you can hit full screen here. And then for every object, you'll see editing options to the right here. So if I were to want to change the color of this drape, I would click on it and I would see a number of options over here. So one option is to ungroup the drape. I can click that, and now all of these drape pieces are actually ungrouped, and I can move them separately if I want to. If I click and drag over all of the objects like this, it will select them all, and then I can actually group them back. You can rotate items by changing the gizmo to rotate. So there's two ways to do that. You can go back and forth between rotate and move with these buttons, or scale, or you can do the same thing over here. You can also change the amount that your objects will move. So by default we're set to 6 inches, but I could change that to a foot, 12 inches, and now every time I move, everything will move by a foot. There's a color picker here. If I click that, I can actually go ahead and just change the color of the drape, and that will adjust all of the objects that you're selecting, one thing to note about this is that it will adjust the color of certain objects. So some objects you might not be able to change the color of. So it's worth playing with the color picker and seeing which objects you can change the color of. So if you look at this one, you can't change the color of this type of object. But if you go to a different type of object, like a screen here, and then try it, you can definitely change the color of the drape, which is around there. So other sliders and objects editing features will pop up for different types of objects. So if you're selecting a screen, you might see selection intensity and a light spill, as well as being able to add an image and some other options here. So if I were to add an image to this screen here, and I wanted to change the intensity of the image as if it was a projection image, I would just use this slider. And then you can also change the light spill, which is just light coming from the room and basically bouncing off of the projection screen. You'll see also that up here there's a screen size. So this is a 9:16 screen. And if you just keep clicking this, it will cycle through a number of different sizes here. And then just up here, you'll be able to move the image, the texture on the screen in different ways. So, and then lastly, you can add an image as well. There's also, for every object, there's a zoom control button. And if you click that, it will basically zoom in on that object, and you'll be able to orbit around that object. And just play around with all the different objects and see what different types of settings you have. So you'll notice, like for lights, you'll have focus features as well. Moving light fixtures, you might have the ability to change the gobo rotation. All right, now we'll cover quick camera controls. So some quick camera controls to try to remember are that holding your right mouse button will orbit you around or turn your camera left and right or up and down. Zooming in is with your scroll wheel, so you can zoom in and out with your scroll wheel. It's always best to use a mouse so you can have these features. Some other things are focusing the actual camera. So if you were to have a bunch of, you would just right click on the person on stage or whatever you want to focus on. And you'll notice that if I right click on the table right in front of me like this, the focus will go to the table in front of me. So if you're ever seeing that the screen is blurry for some reason, just go ahead and click on right click on an object, and that will focus it back to that object. To change your camera view, you're going to go up here and go to either there's a top-down view, left view, right view, front view, orbit view, and first-person view. The difference between the orbit view and the first-person view is that the orbit view is always default. So what it does is it orbits around the sort of center of the room. And then the first-person view is more like you're on the floor and you can turn your camera left and right and sort of walk around. You can do the same thing with the orbit view, where you can move around as well, and you use your WASD keys on your keyboard to move around. You can also save your camera views by setting a certain camera position and then hitting the plus sign, and that will save a camera position. These camera positions typically work best in the first-person camera view. There are also hotkeys to change between each view, so you could use 1 on your keyboard will put you in the first-person camera view. O on your keyboard will put you in the orbit view. 2 on your keyboard will be the top view. 3 will be the front view. 4 will be the left view, and 5 will be the right camera view. So those are quick ways to move around. Okay, we'll cover venues. So for venue options, we have 2 options. One is that we can create a custom ballroom model for whatever room or venue you want. And when we create the venue model, basically it shows up in your account, and you can just drag and drop it in like this. And then you have just some simple controls over it, like changing the light intensity. So you can go ahead and select the venue model, and you can adjust the actual floor plan on it and make sure that you can see where different things are within that. So that's one option. Basically, to do that, you just need to get in contact with us and ask us to create the venue, and then that venue will be in your account. You can also buy venues from this button here if the venue's already been created. The second way to create a room is to go to this build button here. You're just going to set the size of your room. So I might say my room is 90 feet by 80 feet and 18 feet high. And from there, you're just going to have a few simple options to change things. So you can change the ceiling type to a few different options here. You can change the floors from different carpets and different floor types. You can change the walls, and then you can add a floor plan. And to add a floor plan, you just use the add image feature here, or you can select the room by selecting this and then hitting add image. And what will happen is the floor plan that you load in will show up here, and if it doesn't fit exactly, you can use these move tools to fit it to the room exactly as you need. Additionally, you can add some smaller things like an air wall. So if I wanted an air wall to be placed at some point in the room, you can go to this add objects, venues, and then add an air wall here, and just drag and drop out the air wall, and then you can just scale it to fit the size that you need. You could also change the color of the air wall to possibly fit your room. We're working on additional options for rooms as well, so that you can possibly add windows, build different walls, different types of walls, and things like that for a better control of building your room. All right, next we'll go over this build fast feature. All right, so the build feature is a great tool to be able to create a design from scratch really quickly. So you're going to be able to get all of your base objects set up really quickly, and then you can kind of tweak from there. So it's set up to go kind of down the line, so you could start with your room and then move to your stage, backdrop, screens, and so forth. You don't have to go that route, but you can also skip around. So how it works is that for the room, you just set the dimensions of your room, and then after that, you basically do the same thing with each category. So if I wanted a 40-foot wide by 20-foot deep stage, by maybe 1.5 foot high stage, you can do that, and then you can also customize the shape of it. One thing that's cool about the stage is that it will actually populate in a group risers that are a specific size based off the size that you added in here. So if it's a 6x8 riser, it'll fit within the dimensions that you wrote, or something like 4x8, 4x4, and that sort of thing. So I'll just do this again, and I'll add a reflective material like this one maybe. And then if you go to stairs, you can just quickly add stairs to the edge of the stage there. For backdrop, you just have some simple options. Again, you can set your dimensions here, and then maybe some different materials you can play with. All right, and so for screens, you can go ahead and select the type of screen that you want. So you can change between curved, flat, projection screens, a screen with a bezel or a monitor, and also a monitor on a stand. So I'll just go ahead and use this monitor with a bevel. So it looks kind of like a projection screen without any skirting on it. And you can type in the exact width and height if you want, or you can select from a number of standard sizes here. And then after that, you can change to different layouts if you want to use one of these layouts. Moving on, so some rigging options we have. Some basic rigging options are to have some hanging truss, some floor supported truss, and then some ground supported lifts. And to work this is the same way. You can kind of set the width and height that you want and it will automatically populate there. It looks like this is going a little bit too high, so I might set it to something like this, and then maybe I'll just adjust this drape down. So another feature with the build is that if you want to, if you're set on something that you want to keep there and change and then add something new, you just hit place. So I want to keep this truss here, so I'm going to hit place, and then I'm going to add some new truss closer to or downstage. So I'm going to hit this layout right here, and I'm going to change that to, let's say, 40 feet wide. So now I have some downstage truss and some upstage truss that I can use, and I'll just place that as well. Scenery, we have a number of options here, so you can kind of play with all these, but basically you can set in your dimensions again. So maybe I want a 40 foot wide by 16 foot high sort of wall. The dimensions are going to be changing slightly depending on the type of tile you have and scenery. So these tiles, I believe, are 22.5 inches, so you would want to adjust your dimensions for that. You can also play around with different options here, but everything's going to coincide with the dimensions that you add here. Cool. And then once you get that, you go ahead over to lighting and start lighting things. So I'm going to start off with just a stage wash, and I'll set that to something like 14 feet high, and let's do 30 feet wide and we'll add 8 lights in there, and that'll give us a general good spot there. I'll hit place, and then I'm going to add in some lights for kind of backlighting. So I'll hit that at maybe 17 feet high, and go ahead and place that. And then really quickly, I'm just going to change this height to 0 and add some uplights. I'm going to do this the width of the backdrop, and I'm going to add, say, 15 lights or so. Do something like that. Then I'll change the color to something like this really quick. And finally, if you want to, you can add gobo patterns to moving lights. So if I wanted to add some moving lights here, I might do 35 feet wide, and we'll do like 3 movers maybe, and then I'll just add a pattern to them. And if I select them and turn the intensity up and maybe change the color, you can kind of see them better. And then you can play with adding some haze as well if you want to with that. And so that's how to do that. Lastly, seating has a number of options as well. So you can easily populate an area in your room with seating. So if you want to do theater style seating, we have just 2 options here for seats right now. You can also change the color of all the seats. But basically you're going to set the area to whatever area you want. So maybe you want 90 by say 40, and the separation between them is probably going to be around 2 feet if you want them close together, maybe 1.8. And then the separation of the rows would be whatever you want to set it at, but we'll set it at 4 here. And then if you wanted to go in and maybe trim this a little bit, depending on, go in here and create some aisles, something like this. All right, and then if you wanted to change the color, basically you can just select all of the seats that you want to change the color of, and just go ahead and change the color from the color picker. Now if you wanted to, there's some more options with the classroom and banquet style seating. So if you try one of these, you might get this pop-up message that if you're populating too many of these tables at once, it won't let you do it. It'll only populate one or a couple. So you just want to change your settings down here. So maybe I want to keep those the same, but you're definitely going to need some more spacing. So I might change this to 8 feet by 6 feet, or maybe 8 feet by 8 feet, something like this. And then when you select these, you have a couple options that show up over here. So you can actually change the table size. So you can change it to different size if you want. You can change the amount of seats you have at each table. So you could do 2 seats or 1 seat. And then there's also an option to add some elements on the tables, like some glasses and stuff. And so that works as well with the round tables as well. So if I have this amount of tables, I can add a place setting here, and I can maybe change the amount of seats to a bunch more, and you can also change the color of your tables. All right, next we'll look at loading images. So to load custom images onto the platform and to use them, there's 2 ways to do it. One way is to go into images here, and you'll probably have an empty box here, so you can upload files and choose a file and upload it from there. Or you can select an object and add an image, and that will populate over here. If you already have a bunch of images loaded up, then you can basically just add them in by selecting the object and then adding your image this way. All right, next we're going to look at using templates. All right, so if you want to use templates to start from, it's a great option. There's a number of them, and they are separated by different types of themes here. So if you have a client that, let's say, is looking for a more elegant theme, or possibly a more techie theme, you can start playing with those. I would recommend that you add some lighting possibly to the top and possibly a stage, because all of the templates as of right now are just based off the backdrop. So screens, scenery, stuff like that. So we'll go ahead and just drag in a couple templates here. And the way that you can use these is you can drag them in, and then let's say you want to resize them and rework them. So maybe you would change the logos on the screens to something different. So I'll just add that, and maybe you want to change the size of each of these screens, so you just adjust the scale of the screens possibly. Something like this. And then basically you're just going to go through the template and kind of just adjust as you need. So you can use the top views to kind of move around objects if you want. So maybe you want to select all of the drape in the background and move that higher. So I would just select it all and then move it up, possibly widen it. And then maybe you want to, again, just move your objects around. So you're kind of just play around with the objects and move them around as you need. It's basically just the templates are made to be a starting point that you can adjust from there. So you can also group some of the lights to make things a little easier to work with. So maybe I want to select all these lights. I'm holding Shift and clicking on each one of them to select all of them, and then I'm going to group them. And now I can just select one of the lights here and adjust the color a bit, something that maybe matches the color of my screens. And then I'm just going to adjust the height of some of this as well. So maybe I want to kind of adjust the height of this. We'll say that it's hanging or possibly being ground supported. Let's move this up a little bit, and then I'll be able to see that the screens are probably too high, so I'm just going to move these down a bit. And then maybe you want to duplicate some of these drapery pieces or something like this. So again, this is just being able to use the template to adjust things as you need here. And that's kind of how you can go about using the templates. All right, so next we'll go over some drafting tools. So there are a couple ways to create some measurements and helpful operational things with some drafting tools. You'll go into your top view, or if you're in a perspective view, you can just hit markup and it'll take you to the top view here. And basically what you can do is you can use the ruler or the label button. The ruler, so basically what you're going to do is you're just going to click and drag in a straight line along whatever measurement you want, and that will give you an arrow with a measurement above it. And you can follow along with the measurement up at the top of the center of the screen. It will show you exactly how far you've gone. So this one should be around 19 feet. And then also with this label tool, you want to make sure to turn off and on the ruler as well. Otherwise, sometimes if you're dragging, you'll create measurements. But if you want to create labels, the label will show up basically at the center here, and you can click this little box in the upper left and drag it anywhere around the screen, and then create basically a label just or detail. So maybe you say stage 40 feet by 20 feet by 1.5 feet. And so on. You can just create labels and move them around as you need. And then when you're ready to sort of print that or render it, you can go ahead and change the color of this. And oftentimes it's helpful to make it black and white. So you can change it to black and white and then create a render from there. And lastly, we'll look at creating final renders. So once you've got the look that you want and you want to create some final renderings, you can go ahead and set your camera views. So I would recommend going into the first person camera view here and moving your camera around to a position that you want. I typically like to create a sort of close-up side view, which gives a decent angle of the stage and also gives some detail of sort of close-up look. What you're going to do is you're going to hit saved and create a new camera view just by hitting the plus sign there. And then I would go ahead again and move your camera. If you hit 1 on your keyboard or go back to the first person view, it's going to bring you back to the center here. And I usually like to just zoom out a bit and get like a sort of straight on view, something like this. And then you're going to go ahead and hit plus again. And then finally, maybe you want to do sort of a higher up rendering like this. Just do that again. And then you can switch back and forth between all your camera views. And so finally, once you're ready to create a rendering, you just hit this render button up here, and you're going to hit render 4K. We are going to eventually add in an additional option to render HD, which will just be a quicker rendering, but for now you'll get a nice 4K rendering out of this. It'll take up to 60 seconds. Typically it takes anywhere from 30 to 40 seconds, I would say, to download the rendering. Once it's done downloading, it will show up here, and you'll get a link as well as be able to download it. The link will last for, I believe, 5 days. If you want to just share the link with someone instead of sending it to them over email, you can share the link with them, but it'll only last 5 days. And then you can also download the image as well.